Hey man, I was wondering, would you mind painting my Lord of Change? I saw what you did with yours at the game store the other day and I really liked it. I mean, yeah, I'd love to paint another one, but I don't really have the time. Do you think you could compensate me somehow? That'll work. Real quick before the video gets started, I want to head this one off at the pass. There's going to be some information in here that you guys might seem as basic or general information that you feel like everybody ought to know, but please keep in mind that today's videos are entirely based on questions that have been asked to me over the last several years. So just keep in mind that you can't know what you don't know, and just because you knew it doesn't mean that there aren't other people who don't. My name is Graham Johnson and welcome back to Tabletop Glory. Today we're going to be talking about commission painting and how to know when we're ready to actually start doing commissions as either a side gig or a job. Number one, has someone offered you money to paint their models for you? And was the amount of money that they offered you what you would consider reasonable? Well then congratulations, you're already at the point of being able to say you're a commission-based artist. Now, that having been said though, early on, you're probably going to get paid less than you would like, or you will very quickly realize that you have agreed to a much smaller amount than what you probably should have for the level of work that you're going to end up putting into those miniatures. And that having been said, those are oftentimes lessons that are learned the hard way. And there are some things that you can keep an eye out for early on in commission painting to teach yourself very quickly as to what your prices should be. And we're going to run through a few of the lessons that I learned the hard way to hopefully get you guys pointed in the right direction for those of you who want to be commission artists. Number one, identifying the type of commission work you want to do. Now, this is important because traditionally speaking, a commission is where someone will come to you with a miniature that they want painted or a model they want painted, or even like a whole unit or a whole army or whatever, and they will say, I will give you X dollars in exchange for you painting these miniatures. Now, most of the time, it's not that black and white. People will want very specific details for their miniatures, and they'll want it done in a very specific time frame, a time frame that they'll want upfront from you. And when you're first getting started, that's not always an answer that you can accurately give, but we'll get onto that later in the video. Number two, another style of commission painting is what I refer to as stockpile painting, where you're painting things up in your own style on the guise that eventually someone who wants it will buy it. Whether that means you're selling it through something like eBay or any kind of website like that, or even putting it up on like an auction website, or even selling through your own website. So an example of this would be if you were painting up squads of Space Marines, you might get 12 boxes of Space Marines, and each box you're going to paint in a different style. Now that's the assumption that eventually someone is going to come along who wants to buy a commission level paint job of whatever that style was for a whole box of Marines. And that's a really big if. But if you have the ability to kind of stockpile things like that and you have the money to be able to do that, that might be a low stress way of being able to simply pump out miniatures while making a passive income and continuing to work on your hobby along the way. That having been said, I have been doing commission-based miniature painting for well over 8 years, and I think I've been doing miniature painting for around 10 years now. Now, the very first miniature that I ever painted actually ended up being a commission. It was shortly after I got out of college, and I had been doing a lot of canvas painting prior, so I went into this with the confidence that I could make it look decent. But if you take a look compared to then versus now, I've come a long way since then. And that also having been said though, a lot of the miniature painting that I have done for commissions, starting all the way back then to all the way now, very, very few of them have ever been box art paint schemes. So keep in mind that if you're going to do stockpile style miniature painting, with the intention of selling them, the odds of finding someone who is looking for the box art or a box art style paint job, where perhaps if we use the Warhammer example, Dark Angels, exactly how they look on the box art. The odds of you finding someone who is looking for that, but is also willing to pay the price that you're going to put on those miniatures based on the amount of time you're going to sink into them, is pretty low. And you've got to be willing to be able to hold on to them long enough to find that person, or for that person to find you. Setting prices. One of the biggest things that I see from miniature artists or people who are wanting to get into doing commission work is oftentimes they'll only charge a couple of bucks per miniature. And there are some people out there that are dumping hours upon hours of time into some of these miniatures, only to then turn around and maybe charge $5. Now, that having been said, you could also charge like a bulk rate, where if you're going to do 25 or 50 miniatures, yeah, you might reduce the price down to 10 bucks a miniature or 12 bucks a miniature, or whatever you want to make per hour, and then you're going to tell yourself you're going to spend a minimum of 1 hour per miniature, and then I'll go back in and maybe touch up a few things and make the whole commission look good and cohesive, and then boot it out the door, because spending hours upon hours doing a single miniature is not going to be conducive to getting paid. One of the other things that comes into making sure that you're getting paid properly for doing commission miniatures is deciding how much work needs to go into each miniature. A lot of times when YouTubers will talk about how to paint an entire army, they're kind of giving away a little bit of the secret sauce, so to speak, in the way that you kind of have to tackle doing batch commissions. And by batch commissions, I mean 5 or 6 miniatures that are all going to get painted similarly anyway, whether that be because they're all in a squad together or because they are meant to be cohesive. And so a lot of times when we're painting armies, we do like an assembly line paint job, where we're doing all of the pants all in one go, all of the shirts all in one go, all of the whatever all in one go. And you have to approach commission painting in a very similar way, unless you're doing a single miniature for a commission. Now, one thing I can't stress enough, though, is although I've given an example of how I might build up my pricing structure, that's not some cold hard fact that you should do for yourself. If you're having much more success at lower rates or higher rates, by all means, do what your market is allowing you to do. But also keep in mind that your market can dry up, go away, come back. This is not necessarily something that most people get to do as a full-time job. And I'm fortunate enough to know some people who do this as a full-time job. And I have often done it as a full-time job. But it is a bit of a volatile market. Real quick, I wanted to try to put together some kind of a almost like a mathematical formula to maybe help you guys kind of figure out how you should be thinking about setting your prices. Now, if you're doing this just as a way to dump money back into the hobby and kind of take some of the load off your paycheck, then this probably isn't going to apply to you. But for those of you who want to do commissions on a bit more of a professional level and maybe do this as a side hustle to be able to bring in some extra income every now and again, this might be a little bit more on the nose for you guys. So number one, we have our skill level over our final product. This means what our skill is versus what the final product's going to look like. And then we have hours spent over the profit. This is the amount of hours we're going to put into the miniature versus what we're going to get for it at the end of the day when the commission is over. Now, as your skill level increases, the amount of hours you spend is going to decrease, which in theory means that you have a bigger profit because you're not wasting as much time or spending as much time on a miniature. Now, your skill level can go up from all kinds of different things, from switching over to doing more larger commissions and then doing assembly line painting, or perhaps perfecting wet blending or something like that, or a technique that is taking you more time in the early days is now more refined, so it's taking less time. And trying to decide where you should be pricing commissions, you need to be taking all of this kind of into effect so that you don't lowball yourself too much. Like I said, in the early days of me doing miniature painting, I was only charging a couple of bucks per miniature, and I was getting commissions where I was doing 100 miniatures for a commission, and that felt like great money. I'm turning around and making 200 bucks. This is awesome. Until you realize it took a month and a half to finish all those miniatures, and I was burning out by the end of it because I felt like I was rushing through it. But those were in the early days when I didn't have the stamina to be able to sit for 7 or 8 hours painting non-stop. And it was also before I learned assembly line painting, where I want to paint as many red objects as possible, so I only have to mix my red once. I was doing every miniature individually. And perhaps nowadays, if I did a commission like that over again, I wouldn't have such a negative profit, but I don't think I'd crack a profit. So these are things to kind of keep in mind. Something that you might want to consider making for yourself, especially when you're first getting started in miniature painting, is a sheet that has expectations of the commission. So you might want to put the name of the person you're doing the commission for, the model you're doing the commission for, a name and phone number, an address, whatever, basically a invoice, so to speak. But underneath, you might want to have a big section where you can list out all the things that that person is expecting for the commission. Like, let's say he specifically wants you to do box art, but instead of the primary color being green, he wants the primary color to be blue. And he wants the eyes to have a yellow glow to them, or whatever, all of the stuff that they're expecting. And then once you've filled that out, you're either going to get them to sign it, or you're going to, basically email them a copy of it that they are going to approve, so you have a paper trail to say they agreed to this. And then you continue forward with your commission. So that way, if at the end of the commission they say, well, you didn't do X, Y, and Z, but X, Y, and Z aren't on that sheet, that's something that they never told you to do, then it's on them for forgetting to tell you to do that. And it's up to you if you want to add that to the commission or not. Or you may decide that, well, if you send it back and throw in an extra 10 bucks on the price we agreed to, then I'll go ahead and fix those things for you, or whatever the case may be. But it's also a really great way for you to keep a track record of who your problem customers are. Because if you become popular, you might get to a point where you're having a hard time keeping track of who's consistently causing problems or not. When I was doing commissions out of my hobby store, we had to do this just as a paper trail way of making sure that the hobby store had its own butt covered, or its metaphorical butt covered. That also said, though, if you do decide to do commissions through your local hobby store and they are promoting you, having some kind of an invoice and expectation sheet is going to be a really great way to make the store feel more comfortable about promoting you as a miniature painter. One of the last tips I want to leave you guys with is expectations. Making sure that everyone has those same expectations. It's another good reason to have an expectation sheet. You can also put the turnaround time. If you know that it's going to take you a couple of weeks to a month to turn around the commission that you've just gotten, because of whether that be the amount of time that you can sink into working on the project, or the amount of time that you feel comfortable spending every single day, or you just know that maybe you travel for work. So although it may have taken you 2 weeks, it could take you longer because you travel for work. That's something to make sure that the person who is hiring you as a commission artist is fully aware of, and making sure that everyone is on the same page. That's something that kind of came back to bite me midway through me doing commissions, is I ended up with a job that had me traveling for work. And so although I was able to work on miniatures almost every single night, I was on call. And so I might be able to spend 3 or 4 nights in a row working on your miniature, and then I should have finished it on the 5th night, but I had to travel for work unexpectedly because I was on call. And now all of a sudden it's a whole week and a half later, and now you're getting your miniatures. That can be a little frustrating if somebody didn't know that up front. So it's important to make sure that all expectations are on the table, not just from the side of the person who is hiring you, but from your side as well, so that everybody's on the same page. Now, unfortunately, I have to leave you with a little bit of negativity. And that is something that I want you to keep in mind about the negativity of commission painting. There are always going to be 2 groups of people that are negative towards you when it comes to commission work. And that is, number 1, the group of people who think you're charging way too much for the final result that you're giving them. And number 2, people who think that you are charging too much, period, regardless of the quality of your work. And something you have to keep in mind is that those people we're never going to be your customers in the first place. No amount of trying to appease those people is ever worthwhile, and even if you do manage to get some of them to be your customers by appeasing them, it's usually not worth it. Now, if video games have taught me anything, though, it's that if you start encountering enemies, it means you're going in the right direction. So do keep in mind that if you are attracting some negativity, it's just negative people being negative, and do your best to kind of just ignore those people. At the end of the day, we're doing miniature painting because we love it, and if you're doing commission work and you stop loving miniature painting, maybe it's time to stop doing commissions. Sometimes turning what we love into a job can ruin what we love, and turning it back into a hobby can bring the love back to it. So don't be afraid to walk away from commissions if it's not working out for you, and if it's killing the love for the hobby, just walk away. In any case, I hope that I've at least gotten you guys pointed in the right direction today. If you have any questions about getting into commission painting or how to approach commission painting, or any issues that you guys might be having as commission painters but you're not really sure how to tackle or how to push forward from, feel free to leave them in the comments and I will do my best to give my advice. Now please keep in mind that today's video is entirely my thoughts and opinions, and just because it works for me doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to work for you or will work for you. Just take everything I've said with a grain of salt today, and as always, may your display case always be filled and your pile of shame never run empty. Until next time.